Good morning, everyone. My name is Grace Lohr, and I'm pleased to join you today as the Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm honored to join you today from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples of the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations. I'd like to introduce the Minister for Public Safety and Solicitor General, Minister Mike Farnworth.
Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary Lohr, for the introduction, and thank you all for being in attendance today. I'm Mike Farnworth, BC's Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General. First, I'd like to begin by acknowledging I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. And I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the Tecumloops and Suquamish people who are dealing with the continuing tragedy and impact of the residential school system and the dark chapter that is in their nation's history and our nation's history, and our thoughts are with them all today. Last year, we provided $10 million to the Ending Violence Association of BC to establish and administer a multi-year grant program to support the delivery of coordinated community-based emergency sexual assault response services across British Columbia. EVA BC successfully undertook the work and was able to provide grants to 23 organizations throughout the province through both a general services stream and an Indigenous services stream. These grants allowed organizations to deliver trauma-informed and culturally appropriate responses to better meet the diverse needs of sexual assault survivors across the province. Due to the success of the grant program, EVA BC received many strong applications, some of which they were unfortunately unable to fund. So today, I'm pleased to announce that we have now provided EVA BC with an additional $10 million. This will help fund more organizations, those that previously submitted strong applications that demonstrated their capacity to contribute to much-needed sexual assault response services. People facing violence or sexual assault need to know that services in their community are there when they need them. And organizations like EVA BC and the groups who have and will be receiving grants work tirelessly to provide these supports for survivors. EVA BC is a long-standing anti-violence organization in the province, supporting many community-based victim service and violence against women programs throughout BC, including Stopping the Violence counselling programs and multicultural outreach programs. Our government is committed to enhancing emergency responses to sexual violence across this province. That's why we've increased funding within the sector to provide over $42 million annually to support over 400 victim service and violence against women programs across the province. And we're committed to working with Parliamentary Secretary Lohr to develop an action plan to end gender-based violence. Ending violence, supporting safety, and creating security are central to our work as government. And it's essential that people who have been sexually assaulted have immediate access to medical services, counselling, and support. I'd like to thank the partnership with my ministry, the Ministry of Finance's Gender Equity Office, the Minister's Advisory Council on Indigenous Women, and the Ministry of Health in launching the grant program. But we cannot do this work alone. And the work that EVA BC does is paramount in the goal to end gender-based violence. On a personal note, I want to take a moment to thank Tracy Porteous for her past 26 years at EVA BC and over 30 years in the sector. It's been a real pleasure to work with you, Tracy, over the last few years, getting to know you and recognizing the truly unwavering commitment, passion, and devotion to the needs and well-being of victims and survivors of crime. It's been incredibly inspiring. Your empathy and dedication will be missed, and you'll be leaving a lasting legacy in this province. And I also want to extend a warm welcome to Ninu Kang, whose extensive experience in the sector will benefit us all as she steps into her new role as Executive Director of EVA BC. I look forward to working with you and our continued partnership with EVA BC. Thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you so much, Minister. We are here today to talk about addressing sexualized violence and the need to support survivors with the care that they both need and deserve. I recognize that for too many, today's announcement will be a painful reminder of their own trauma. And for those who find themselves in this place, please know that you are not alone and it is not your fault. We are working to ensure that you have the support and services that you need. It is my pleasure now to introduce Tracy Porteous of the Ending Violence Association. I've worked personally with Tracy, and it's an honor to be introducing her in this way. Tracy started her remarkable career, like so many of us, as a volunteer. She has experience supporting survivors, and it has made her a visionary and a pioneer in the field. She's been an advocate for improved services in the gender-based violence sector for over 3 decades. She's also a recent and well-deserved recipient of the Order of British Columbia. Our province is a safer and more supportive place because of her. Tracy, please join us to say a few words.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Grace Lore, our Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity, and Mike Farnworth, our Solicitor General and Minister responsible for Public Safety. I can't be more thrilled. I couldn't be more thrilled to be with us, with everybody today. On behalf of the Ending Violence Association of BC, just on the eve of my retirement, we represent and support over 300 gender-based violence response programs and initiatives in BC. And the EVA office is situated on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Musqueam peoples. And it's our honor to be on this land today. I'm also proud to stand beside the Minister and Solicitor General of BC, Mike Farnworth, and proud to stand beside, virtually that is, across the pond, with our Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity, Grace Lore. I'm proud to be among leaders who get it, leaders who are informed and have a sophisticated analysis of the serious and enduring harms caused by sexual violence, leaders who understand the critical need for communities across BC to have response services on the ground for those harmed. You know, we live in a society that of course is well-meaning, but I don't think our society has really quite been able to grasp how serious and complex the injuries caused by sexual victimization are. Sexual assault undermines a survivor's long-term ability to feel safe in the world, to be intimate, to have relationships, to find enjoyment and happiness in life, to concentrate, to earn an income, to stay in school, even to trust herself in the world around her. I think these are all basic human rights that most people take for granted. But when you've been sexually assaulted, these things all come into question. They're all impacted. And I think that having services on the ground to support people that have been harmed in this way is of critical importance. Services and service providers who know how to compassionately and appropriately respond to sexual assault, advocates that can assist survivors to access emergency health care and to report to the police if they choose, and to take up their role as a witness in court if that's what happens, to talk to their parents or other loved ones about what's happened. This all involves navigating complex systems and sometimes family dynamics that are not really quite yet set up to be trauma-informed and culturally appropriate. I also think that throughout history, survivors of sexual assault have experienced a painful and unsettling phenomenon called victim blaming. More than any other crime, survivors of sexual assault have been treated with suspicion and have had their past and their dignity dragged through court. And I believe that these images and historical facts are deeply ingrained into the hearts and minds of survivors. So in order for us as a society to change that, in order for us to encourage more survivors to come forward, we need to build informed services who can be there when survivors and their loved ones need us most. A few facts. Statistics Canada in 2019 helped us understand that there are 4.7 million women, about 30% of the population of women under the age of 15 that have been sexually victimized. 1.2 million men, approximately 8% of the population of males over the age of, since the age of 15 have been sexually assaulted. That same report also helped us outline that women were more likely to experience unwanted sexual behavior in public places, at work and online, and that young women between the ages of 15 to 24 are amongst the highest target group by sex offenders. And when we account for other demographics, sexual orientation was the largest risk factor for males. I think that we've known from studies that sexual assault is the most underreported of all violent crime in our country. And so if we are truly going to act upon our collective intention, which I believe we have, which is to encourage more survivors to come forward in the hopes that more survivors can get the psychological and emotional care they deserve, and so that we can try to mitigate the potential lifelong effects of being sexually assaulted, then we simply must have coordinated, sophisticated services in communities all across our province, in all communities, large and small. So again, Minister Farnworth and Parliamentary Secretary Lohr, you have our profound thanks for giving survivors a solid chance towards healing. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for your words and for your work. I'm also really pleased to welcome incoming Executive Director of the Ending Violence Association of BC, Ninu Kang. Ninu has held numerous leadership roles in her career, including board president at both the Women's Research Centre and Battered Women's Support Services. Ninu was also one of the founding members of the Punjabi Women's Association and of the South Asian Community Coalition Against Youth Violence. She has also co-chaired the Ending Relationship Abuse Society of BC and has a very long career with Mosaic, supporting newcomers in our province. Welcome, Ninu.
Parliamentary Secretary Lohr, Minister Farnworth, for the very warm welcome. And as you can imagine, I'm thrilled and excited to take on this new role. And as we, as you announced this money today, as Tracy said, we are proud to stand next to you in this work. There is a growing public awareness as a result of the Me Too movement, and as well, reclaiming power and place. The final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and other such calls to actions that have brought us to this momentous place where the province is putting money and resources into the hands of service providers that are ready to support survivors. We applaud the government's continued commitment to the provision of support for survivors of sexual violence in BC. We applaud too those who have stepped forward to offer services in communities, large and small, Indigenous, non-Indigenous. It is truly a collective effort where everyone is working together that will make the most difference in the lives of survivors. Never before have we seen such public discussion on sexual violence. In the last few years alone, hashtag been raped, never reported was a widespread social media response where for the first time in the history, we have witnessed the solidarity of millions of women from across the globe coming together with disclosures about being raped and knowing that the vast majority of these women had never reported. The thousands of stories that have been written, blogged, videotaped about Ghomeshi, Cosby, and again, the growing number of women coming forward to say, there will be silent no longer. The rape chants, gang rapes, sexual assaults, and sexualized hate climate being exposed by survivors and the media in universities across the country. The public class action suit by female RCMP officers disclosing sexual harassment and investigations currently occurring, the same as the Canadian military. A call after public call, a public inquiry into the murdered and disappearance of Indigenous women. I keep thinking about the hashtag, our time is now. So it's clear public attitude towards sexual violence are changing. As a community, we are conscious of the prevalence of sexual assaults against women and children, two-spirit, trans, and gender non-binary people. And we are being asked to make many changes to how our systems respond. Sexual assault is complex. It does not neatly fit into one policy or one discipline. Most survivors I've known needed and wanted emergency response and counseling to assist them to deal with the complex, confusing, frightening, and psychological aftermath. Survivors come from all classes, faiths, cultures, sexualities, genders, and abilities. It's therefore important to ensure that our responses are culturally respectful, and competent to work across cultures and faith, class, ability, gender, and sexuality. It's a fact that more marginalized one is in this world, the more vulnerable you are to sexual and other types of victimization, such as women who live with disabilities, Aboriginal women, immigrant refugee women, women of color, poor women, transgendered women. A sense of personal security is essential to the psychological, intellectual, emotional, economic, and spiritual sense of wellness for any person. Once again, I thank you for standing next to us in this work.
Thank you so much, Ninu, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you also, Tracy and Minister. Our province must be a safe place for everyone, for our families, friends, our neighbours. And yet, as Tracy and the Minister both outlined, half of the women in BC have experienced physical or sexual violence since the age of 16. That's more than 1 million women in our province. Every week, there are an estimated 1,000 physical or sexual assaults against women. These assaults, we know, are disproportionately targeted at Indigenous women and girls, women of color, those living with disabilities, and those in the 2S LGBTQ+ communities. Community-based organizations in BC and their committed staff and volunteers work to support people who have faced sexualized violence. Over the last year, they have risen to meet the rise in gender-based violence while navigating how to provide care in a pandemic. Having been an advocate and a volunteer in the sector, I know what this work is like for those who do it, the long hours and the weight that you carry. I also know the difference you make and the privilege of providing care to strong and resilient survivors. Today, more help to do that work is on the way. We have gotten here with the work, advice, and guidance of so many people. I would like to take a minute now to acknowledge the Minister's Advisory Council on Indigenous Women who helped us on this journey. In particular, I want to acknowledge Sarah Robinson, a member of the Advisory Council and an advocate for Indigenous women and girls, for reconciliation, and for the learning and unlearning of our colonial past and present. Today, of course, is a reminder of the nature of that work and the work to come. Sarah returned to her ancestors this weekend after a battle with cancer. Her work, her contributions, and her friendship to me and to so many others will be valued always and missed, and I lean into the gratitude of the impact of her on this work. With the work still before us, I'm grateful to be here for this announcement. The availability of services when, where, and how survivors need them makes all the difference to those who experience violence. Of course, our commitment to this issue doesn't stop here today with this announcement. We intend to go much further with the development of an action plan to end gender-based violence. We will continue to do this in collaboration with many advocates, those on the front line, those in the sector, like Tracy and Ninu, who have so much expertise and experience. And we will work to ensure that much needed funding continues to support sexual assault response services that are trauma-informed, survivor-centered, and culturally safe. Thank you very much.
To reporters on the phone, you may now press *1 to enter the queue. We will be limited to one question and one follow-up today. Please also remember to take your phone off mute, as you will not be audible until your name is called. Our first question today is from Binder Sajan from CTV. Binder, please go ahead.
Thank you. And so I understand this funding is 3-year funding, and often in the past, ongoing funding has been an issue for people who provide these kinds of supports. And I'm just wondering, would it be helpful if, there was permanent funding available, or if these types of services were brought under a ministry to make sure that, all places in the province would have access to different types of services?
Binder. In my mandate letter, it is set out to develop that core program of sustained funding for core-based services for survivors of sexual assault and centres right across the province. And so the funding that we have put in place and this additional funding and the grant programs that we'll be funding allow us to inform how that should move forward so that we're able to have in place the long-term sustained funding that organizations require.
Binder, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and I heard Ninu and others speaking about sort of different social movements, whether they're online or, through the media, that are kind of taking up and really highlighting sexual violence and talking about the impact on people. And we've seen also locally some social media movements, whether they're on Instagram, that are, outing people, if you will, or talking about the impact of people. And I'm wondering if there's ever been, or if you're considering partnering with some of those types of movements to try and kind of grow awareness about this. And then the second part of it is, in the past, we've kind of focused a lot on, getting convictions, but now it seems to be getting people's minds to change and how they perceive sexual violence seems to be a bigger kind of part of the movement. And if you can just maybe comment on that.
Tracy?
Yeah, I think that's a very the Been Raped Never Reported social media campaign that sprung up as a result of Jian Gomeshi. 10 million survivors retweeted that over 48 hours. I think what we're seeing now is this growing movement of survivors wanting to empower other survivors to undo the damage that has been caused throughout centuries by silence. And by silence, people are held in this place of shame. And I think when we shine a light on something that has been empowered by being in the shadows, we have potential for healing, even if it's, a survivor in Victoria reaching through Twitter, a survivor in Toronto, or a survivor in Northern Ontario. I can't tell you how much healing can be done through empathy. And there's volumes of empirical evidence that suggest that survivors are looking more to heal and more to be able to live a life of dignity and not judgment than they are looking for a criminal justice response. Having said that, criminal justice systems need to be trauma-informed, and they need to be sophisticated, and they need to know what they're doing for those survivors that choose to go down that route. But I can tell you that we are alive to the Instagram that is currently happening in relation to some of the hospitality industry in Victoria, and some of the offenders that have hurt some of the survivors that are telling those stories there. And absolutely, we are working with many industries, including hospitality, including oil and gas, including the CFL across the country, including other corporations and businesses. And so I think you're exactly right. We need to meet survivors where they are. Indigenous survivors are naming names and having their own Me Too moment that has been going on for the last few years. And so I think when we see that happening, we need to meet them. The services being announced today is part of that, so that there are services on the ground in those communities when a survivor comes forward, because that can open up quite a lot of pain where somebody needs a sophisticated, trained person to help with the navigation of that. But the social movement, I've been in this work for 40 years. I've never seen anything like what's been going on for the last 10. And I think it's only getting stronger, and survivors' voices are only getting louder, and that's a good thing for our society.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's all the questions we have today and all the time we have today. So thank you for joining us.